Hi, and welcome to this live reading from My Pearl Heart by J.N. Sheats, and this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1. My body was on fire, melting into a worthless puddle as the dark, tall, and sexy-as-hell stranger conquered my mouth. What a way to start a Friday morning! This was more than enough for me to forgive Cadence for dragging my butt out of bed at 5 a.m. with her emergency. As I headed out this morning, I knew another long conversation about real emergencies versus Cadence's loose idea of an emergency was only a short 20-minute drive away. This was the third time in the last month my cell phone buzzed right off my dresser before dawn, with Cadence on the other end freaking out over some new crisis. But lip-locked with this handsome devil, all was forgiven. My mood switched in a blink from half awake and bitchy to generous. This is assault. I'm being assaulted. My rational mind screamed, but the rest of savored every lingering moment. I had never been kissed like this before. Did real people even kiss this way? It was too hungry. No, starved sounded better. Nah, that's not desperate enough. Fiery, passionate, powerful, all-consuming. That came close, but nothing accurately described the moment or him. He was a head-turner with a sleek appearance and intense honey-colored eyes. Add the hard muscles I felt under a tailored suit, and he was nothing less than drool-worthy. Assault or a really strong come-on. At least I had something exciting to recount sitting at early bird bingo with the other ladies in the nursing home years down the road. So what is he doing quenching his thirst with me? Shut up, logic, you pest, I growled at myself as the stranger gripped my hips, pulling me closer to his hard body from where I sat on the kitchen counter. Yes, shut up, brain. I moaned into the increased intensity of his kiss, and I swear I heard him growl in reply. Maybe it was my imagination. I couldn't trust my senses. This guy was kissing me delirious. How are you feeling? He asked, pulling away. I whimpered in response to the absence, missing his sinful mouth already. Wonderful. The words fell out before my mind could catch up with the fast pace of the moment. There was no denying it. This guy pushed all the right buttons and then some. His warm breath crashed against my ravaged lips in a wicked taunt as he chuckled. I meant the ankle, he cooed, but thanks for the compliment. What ankle? Heat flooded my face, which made me blush harder because I knew how telling my pale complexion was. Casper, being my nickname in high school, said it all. With the heat rushing to my face, I knew my cheeks were beet red with embarrassment. The stranger's cocky smirk widened into a grin. This was all his fault. That kiss of his had stolen all rational thought from my head and wiped my memory of the last few moments. I forgot how I ended up here, sitting on my best friend's kitchen counter with a swollen ankle, a sore butt, and a drop-dead sexy man standing between my legs. It was coming back to me now with all its humiliating glory. When Cadence called this morning, I rushed out of the house without showering or priming for the day. Instead, I grabbed up my work clothes, threw my unruly hair into a homeless-looking updo, and raced out the door in my baggy college sweater and sweatpants. That was the beauty of having your best friend as a business partner. No need to look the part on these last-second calls for an in-home meeting. Now I regretted the mad dash. Should have made her wait until I got into the office, but Cadence called and I jumped, like always. Here I was, looking like I stepped out of Walmart after a late-night shopping trip, rumpled, sleep-hazed, and, oh, dear God, my breath. All while he stood there like a delicious piece of refined chocolate with a salted caramel center. On cue, my stomach let out a loud, demanding growl, and I swear I must have turned a deep shade of burgundy with the increased humiliation. Delight sparkled back from the stranger's honey eyes as he gave half a chuckle. Breakfast, clothing, hygiene were the last things on my mind when I rushed out the door. And when I arrived at Cadence's lavish apartment, I also wasn't looking for the spilled coffee on the floor. That's how I ended up with a twisted ankle and falling flat on my ass in front of a dream boy. There was no hiding it. I was a homeless-looking, clumsy idiot without a thoughtful reply in my frazzled head, and beyond mortified as I sat there, my mouth bobbing open and closed like a hungry goldfish. Strike me dead, someone, anyone, before I implode from embarrassment. There was no way this could get any worse. Finally, I heard Cadence say from down the hall, followed by the clicking of her designer heels. Spoke too soon. We've been waiting all morning, Jazzy. All morning. It was only 6:30. Cadence dramatic as usual. When her voice first broke the awkward silence between me and the stranger, he jumped away suddenly like I had burned him. Or maybe he realized who I was and this was a case of mistaken identity, but how? It would be hard to confuse my 5'0" curveless figure for Cadence's 6' model body. For one, he wouldn't have had to lift her to reach the counter. Whatever startled him stole the smoldering gaze from his eyes. His back went rigid, his shoulders back, and body like stone. The stranger's comfortable appearance switched to professional, almost businesslike. He smoothed down the front of his shirt and adjusted his tie as Cadence rounded the corner into the kitchen. I stayed there in my goldfish daze, even more confused than before. What just happened? Why are you on the counter? Cadence asked, looking between me and the stranger with suspicion. How did you end up there? I didn't think you could reach that high. Oh, ha, short jokes. Cadence had always been the playful type, and she loved her clever sense of humor. Pointing out my shortcomings and character flaws were some of her favorite topics. If Cadence didn't tease you, it meant she didn't like you. She loved me. A lot. She slipped, the stranger blurted out. It rushed out of his mouth much like a child coming up with an excuse to cover up something they did wrong. So was kissing me a mistake? Cadence didn't pick up on the skittish tone of his voice as she moved toward him, tucking herself into his beautifully sculpted body. Her hand rested possessively on his chest while she snuggled in closer, and right away I wanted to dismember her, my best friend. Here I was plotting her demise because of a guy. This was a first. Jazzy is a clumsy one. Gotta keep your eye on her, Cadence teased. What a gentleman you are, sweeping her off her feet. Did you introduce yourself? I cocked a brow at her and questioned what exactly was their relationship. She was clinging awfully close to him, but then he kissed me. What am I missing? We've met before, he replied. My confusion grew. I didn't remember this guy, and he made one hell of a first impression. We haven't been formally introduced, though, I corrected. Jazzy. I hated when Cadence called me that. You don't remember? My lips parted slightly, stuck between an answer and a question, and the dazed mouth-bobbing goldfish was back. I was good at recalling faces and people, but I couldn't place him. There was no way I could have met him before and not remembered. He was too intense to forget. Cadence rolled her eyes and huffed. James Connor? She paused for a moment to move away from James, placing her hands on her hips. We did his parents' anniversary party 2 years ago? Oh, yes. Then it hit me hard. Oh. The Connors were a well-to-do family that we did a considerable amount of business with. Cadence often tripped over herself to handle anything they brought us. A well-respected family with a long history of financial success and one son, a son I last saw being escorted from his parents' 50th anniversary party by a friend, and 5 members of the security team, drunk and reeling after I slung some rather nasty comments his way. I was the drunk asshole you ran off, he admitted, shifting beside Cadence, who had a Cheshire grin on her face. She was loving this while I entered an unknown level of humiliation remembering that night. Picture a slobbering guy with a half-full glass of scotch, stumbling over his own drool while hitting on every young thing at a lavish, classy, expensive party. Suit messy, hair unwashed, and what looked like years and stains on his white shirt. How could this be the same guy? After a number of complaints from the staff and party guests, I approached the man, James, and asked him to take his party to a private room I had set aside. Anything to get him away from the guests while still being professional and respectful to one of the Connors' guests. The response I got was rude, as expected, and I remained polite, edging him to the private room. James was insulting, a jerk, and a complete pervert, but that didn't mean I had to blow up on him. Yes, I lost my temper in the middle of the party, in front of our clients, in front of their guests, and now I was finding out it was their son I had escorted out of the party. No wonder the Connors were so upset. We ended up having to refund half the commission. James wants to hire us for an event, Cadence beamed. Now I had to work with the guy? Show him venues and set up an event he was scheduling? No, I couldn't even look at him. I directed my gaze to the spilled coffee on the tiled floor. I would have to assign another person to the event. Someone else had to work with him, and I could oversee the details from the office. We won't have a repeat of that night, I assure you. I cringed at his comment, feeling more and more like a scolded child. That's how I acted that night, like a child, letting him get to me like that, like he did. Idiot. I promised to behave, he added with a chuckle that eased my stress for the moment. If he could joke about it, then I could too. Maybe. James will be a complete gentleman for this big event he has coming up, Cadence jumped in. She never could let the attention be off her for too long. Wonderful, I responded with forced thrill. What's the occasion? James went to respond, but Cadence blurted it out before him, unable to control her unusual excitement. A wedding. I sat there on the countertop, my short legs dangling over the edge, fighting the urge to return to my clueless goldfish expression. There was no point hiding my shock. I was never good at hiding emotions, but I still forced myself to smile. The emotionless expression on James was interesting. Cadence was more overjoyed than he was about his own wedding. Me, I was lost. Recap. James Connor is in my friend's kitchen. He kissed me silly. He is getting married and he wants me to organize it for him. Yep, that sounds about right for reality. That's great, I flat out lied. Will your bride to be joining us to discuss what you two are looking for? The words were sickening coming from my lips, sounding even worse when they hit my ears. James Connor was getting married. The guy who rocked my world, teased a bit of life back into my sensual side, and made me feel sexy in sweats, had a fiance. Life sucks. Cadence started to bubble with growing excitement. Her deep brown eyes lightened in color, and the silly teenage smile that spread across her lips was annoying. She looked like a schoolgirl with her first crush. I was missing something. My question went unanswered as James looked away and down at his shoes. Cadence bit her lip as if she was trying to restrain herself from some type of hysteria she ached to get out. Before I could ask a second time about James's fiance, Cadence shyly tucked her face into James's shoulder and held out her hand in my direction. A big fat diamond, and what I guessed was a platinum ring, clung to her finger. James and I are getting married, she said, giggling, and I spread my lips into the widest bullshit smile I could. What the hell?